We are cooking, folks. Another week is upon us. We have our ADP shifts of the week. And on today's episode, we're going to look at what guys went earlier, what guys moved later, and whether or not that changed how we view most of those names. I've done my best here to isolate what I believe to be the most intriguing, I guess. I don't know what the right word for it is. The ones that really jumped out, it's a dozen of each. There's 12 guys that moved earlier, 12 guys that moved later, and these are the ones that I think are starting to either get near a tipping point or perhaps are passing it. Welcome to Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. I'm your host, Dan Bespris. You can find me on social at Dan Bespris, and you can follow Old Man Squad at Old Man Squad. That's the network feed. You'll get all of our amazing shows. Also, it'll follow you back. So if you want to add one follower to your Twitter account, that's a good way to do it. Please hit the like button before you do anything else if you're watching the show. And if you have a comment at any point while watching, throw that in there as well. Or even if you don't have a comment, just put like a thumbs up or something on that. That really helps get our YouTube videos into everybody's feed. If you're listening on more traditional channels, you guys know the drill by now. Please do subscribe and hit that 5-star button on Spotify. If you can do a 5 on Apple, I know it takes a little longer, but those are big deals as well as we try to catapult our way up the boards with the season fast approaching. Quick reminder of what we're doing on today's show. These are ADP shifts. We look at these every week, every Monday, basically leading up to the season. We'll do based on how many were left. I think we'll have 4 more of these, the 30th, the 7th, the 14th, and the 21st, that very last day before the season starts. We'll have kind of our last ADP shift. So 4 more of these episodes between now and the start of the season. Who are the new steals? Who are the new busts as players bounce up and down the draft board? We also need to remember, as we're looking at these ADP values, that they are on the move. So when someone moves, say 1 or 1.3 or whatever it is in one direction, it actually means that they were farther than that over the last week, especially the deeper we get into draft season. The deeper we get, the more drafts that have already happened, and so it becomes harder and harder to move a player's actual ADP. Let's get right into this thing. No reason to do anything else. We gave you the preface. Here are the risers. These are earlier ADPs. I realize that a rising number would suggest that a player is going later. In my mind, the board works from top to bottom, kind of like when you're in the Yahoo draft room. So a riser is a player who's moving up towards the top of the board, hence a lower ADP actual value. What I think I'd like to do today is just go through them one by one. We'll do all 12. We'll spend about a minute to a minute 30 on each guy. And I'll let you, and you will hang out on ones that are more interesting, but I'll try to give my best explanation on how I feel about each in their new destination. James Harden moving up to 20.3. That's the new number for James. And it's notable because he has continued to move earlier and earlier and earlier over and over and over again. Harden, and we kind of knew this was going to happen when he opened up at like 25.7. He's moved up now 5.4 altogether over the month and change that drafts have been open. And it's not really slowing down. In fact, it was 0.4 the first week or first half week. And then he jumped by 2. Then he jumped by 1.3. And each of the last 2 weeks, he's moved up by 0.9 exactly. But again, what this tells us isn't that he's going at 20.3. That's the new number. The fact is, he was going at 21.2 before this with, a month of data in. And with an extra week of data, it pulled it up by 1 almost full ADP integer. But the drafts that are happening now have to be farther forward because this is all average. We need the mean of the number, not just the mean of 21.2 and this last week. 21.2 is weighted about 4 times larger than the drafts that happened this last week. It's not exact because more drafts are happening quicker now. The closer we get to the season, there's just like a bigger number every week. But in all likelihood, this means that Harden's probably going closer to 17 or 18 in most public drafts. I still like him there. I think that's kind of where he probably ends up in 9-category leagues. I don't think there's a chance he goes much lower than that. He could go 3 or 4 slots higher when we're talking about final number. So I still like Harden at 20 point. I like him a lot at 20.3, but I like him still where I think this probably means he's going, which is more like 18, 17. Alperen Sengun is now at 29.7. He's another guy that's just been steadily climbing. Opened at 35.3, moved as far as 31, and then another big jump this last week to 29.7. A 1.3 size leap in the early part of the board is a pretty big deal this time of year. That means that Sengun is actually going more towards the beginning of the third round instead of the middle of it now. And for my money, this is the same explanation as last week. He's a repeat offender on this board because he keeps climbing. If you're punting free throws, I think this is a perfectly reasonable place to take him. I have no issue with it. Last year, if you punted foul shots, he was number 24. Does he do more this year? I don't know. He did quite a lot last season. It feels kind of like his role stays relatively similar year over year. I don't know exactly what people are like, oh, there's going to be an Alperen Sengun breakout. The breakout was last year. He is what he is. The way that Alperen Sengun gets anywhere near this number in 9-cat is fixing the free throw number, because that was bad last year, 69% on pretty high volume. He was already up to 16 almost shots a game. Like, that's a team that just keeps adding talent to the roster. So I don't think he's going to just magically do a bunch more. I think he probably gets around what he did last year, which, you know, he's getting drafted 26, 27, and you're punting foul shots. That's great. If you care about free throws, you're kind of taking your life into your hands on this one. Not that you can't bounce back from it. You can, but, you know, it takes a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander to wipe out the negative that Sengun put on your foul shots last year. So why would you do that to yourself is basically the question. If you add Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, just try to win free throws. You can get other guys on the board that do something similar to what Sengun does without the massive foul shot hit, not too far from this part of the draft board. We're talking mid-third round. I mean, you know, who else is going near there? I know that Cat is not going to get you the same defensive stats that Sengun did last year. But the scoring, the rebounding, the assists were not that different, frankly. Sengun a little bit higher in assists, Cat a little higher in three-pointers, and Cat way better at foul shots. Not that I want Karl Anthony Towns, but, like, if you're debating between those two guys and you care about free throws, you probably go Towns. Or Bam Adebayo, who's a lot like Sengun. He was at 4 assists. Sengun was at 5. Bam was at 10 rebounds. Sengun was at 9. Bam was at 19 points. Sengun was at 21. They shot 52, 53.5% respectively, and Bam was at 76% at the foul line. Sengun was at 70. Why would you... Anyway, again, this is not me trying to pick on Sengun. He just keeps going earlier and earlier, and I can't imagine that everybody is punting free throws. And again, you don't have to, but there are other options there that you don't have to worry about that. Jalen Williams is finally starting to move up the board a little bit. This took a while because he only moved up by 1.7 over the first month. This last week, he jumped by another 1, basically. 0.9 was the jump to 41.2. That means he's probably going closer to about 40. I'm still into him there. You guys have heard me talk about Jalen Williams plenty on this show. We don't need to deep dive him on this episode. I think he has like early 30s potential. I mean, frankly, he has late 20s potential this week, but this year. But I think he's early 30s. I don't want to say easily, but kind of easily. So going near 40, I'm still into Jalen Williams. I think that's totally fine for him. And, you know, kind of an interesting little footnote, and we're going to talk about it in the second half of the show. Jalen Johnson, who opened at 36.8, has now fallen into a dead heat with Jalen Williams. Those guys have almost, you know, ships passing in the night kind of thing. Tobias Harris, 68.7. I left nicknames on this thing, and that was not on purpose for those that are looking at the sheet, but you guys know what I'm talking about now. Tobias Harris at 68.7 is... starting to get a little bit annoying. I wouldn't say that I'm out yet, but I wanted to highlight him because he continues to move a good amount pretty much every week. He opened at 78.6. He had moved 9 earlier, even before this last week, and then another 1 earlier. And some of that might just be sort of like a lingering impact of drafts that are still happening a little bit sooner. But the fact is, he's moving towards the mid 60s now, sometimes even the early 60s. It's not that exciting anymore. I love Tobias Harris. You know I do. And he has top 40 fantasy potential this season because all he really has to do would have to be like to take another 1 to 1.5 shots a game over what he did last year. And he moves up a half round to a full round because efficiency is good for him. But I also don't think that we can guarantee he does. He tends to be somewhat comfortable just doing what he does, even on a bad team like Detroit. And so suddenly now we're inching closer to that 50 range where you're like, this is the safe prediction for him. How much earlier am I willing to go? A little earlier than this. I'm still good with him at 68.7. But if this starts to creep into the early 60s, I think I might start to look a different direction. The only way I wouldn't is that the other guys going near him on the board are guys I don't really want on my fantasy team anyway. Cam Thomas up to 76.2 now. He's another guy who's been zooming up the board really since Yahoo redid their for revision 2 of their pre-ranks, which I feel like a revision 3 is probably not that far away right now. They usually do 3 or 4 revisions, one maybe towards the end of this month, beginning of the next, and then one like right before the season starts. But we won't worry about that for now. Cam Thomas opened at 83.4. He actually fell 3.5 slots the first week, but since then he's climbed 11. Jumped 5, jumped 3.5, jumped 1, jumped another 1.5. He's going in the early 70s now based on this ADP and the trend line. And that to me is too soon. Cam Thomas, he is, I don't want to say one-dimensional, but pretty close to one-dimensional. It's points. But he's also positive in free throw percent. His threes will probably be positive this year, but they're not as insane as you'd expect from a guy who's jacking up shots. But he's a big negative in rebounds, steals for a guard, blocks, field goal percent, huge negative. I'm assuming turnovers will kind of become a negative, but not a massive one. And it caps him out, unfortunately, in 9-cat. If you're punting field goal, he's a guy that does move up the board, although a lot of guys move up the board, so it's not as significant a jump as you might expect, but you could understand the 70-some-odd draft slot for a punt field goal team. He's just not really my cup of tea. Coby White at 79. He had kind of leveled off a little bit, actually. Had only moved about 1. In total, he'd only moved 1.8, and then all of a sudden now he jumped a full slot earlier. It's kind of surprising. I don't know. I'm actually not sure what that means yet. Are people suddenly in on Coby White? Was this just a weird week where he got drafted earlier in some chunk of drafts? I'm not going to make a sweeping generalization about what this means for White, but he's already a guy I was kind of nervous about because he, frankly, like Cam Thomas, has weird holes in his fantasy game, specifically on defense. That's a big problem for Coby. He's fine in this range. He's probably going to be a 70 to 100 range dude who gets there on exclusively counting stats. That's basically all he does. Last year, he was number 98 on 19 points, 5 assists, and very little else. It's a small positive in threes. Also, I should mention that one. Rebounds were fine, not spectacular, fine. Steals, blocks low, field goal low. Free throw was okay, not terrific, but not bad. And then, he'll turn the ball over as well. So again, upside capped a little bit. I'm not targeting Coby White here. I don't have a problem with folks who draft him around 80 because I don't think he's going to be like a total mess, but I don't really like him here either. Isaiah Hardenstein back on the list again. He's moved up another 0.8, but it is slowing down a little bit. Previous week, he had moved up by 3. He was flying up the board. So at least now he's kind of slowing down. So this one's sort of like a good news, bad news moment where Hardenstein, I don't think he's rocketing as fast as he was. It seems like he's approaching kind of the horizontal asymptote here on his ADP, barring another Yahoo board realignment. So public drafts, you probably have to get him in the late 70s would be my guess. Expert drafts, we're seeing him go early to mid 70s. But again, like these shows are to try to set you up against a perfectly mismatched 11 other managers, whether it's a Yahoo public league or your friends or whoever. assuming you're not playing against 11 other experts, these numbers should be somewhat sufficient. So I still like Hardenstein here. I think he's a top 75 guy, kind of floor this season, just because of his fantasy game. It's intensely awesome. If he jumps another round, we'll rethink it. But for now, we're still good with it. OG Anunoby up to 99.4. Finally, this was sort of a long time coming, honestly. He had been really hovering. He was opened at 100. He fell to 102. Stayed at 102 for 2 weeks, moved up to 101. Now he's up to 99.4. So finally now kind of moving forward the way we expected. I find myself not really targeting OG all that often because there is some uncertainty in exactly what he's going to get to do in the Knicks offense this year. And when you're like, is this dude going to get to do stuff on offense for the Knicks? The answer often, other than the first couple of names on your board, is no. OG has plenty of other stuff in his fantasy game that can kind of float him. He's got the steals. He's got the blocks. He'll hit a few threes. I'm starting to worry that, and I mean, the durability has been an issue for him for a few seasons running now. I think I'm kind of out, actually, on OG. When he opened, I think he opened at like 110, but no one was buying it. 102 versus 99. Although, again, like the movement up the board suggests that he's going more towards mid-90s now. I guess that's fine. I mean, the other names around there are not exactly shoo-ins for fantastic value, but just looking around OG on the ADP board, guys I'd rather have, Jakob Poeltl, I'd rather have, Herb Jones, similar fantasy makeup, but probably safer, although it's another team where you don't really know what a guy's going to do. Terry Rozier just keeps falling. Bogdan Bogdanovic, I'd probably rather have. Zubats, John Collins, I think I'd rather have most of those guys. Alex Caruso, I think they beat him this year, and then most of those guys probably play more games too. Speaking of Zubats, he's the other name. Well, we're at, what is this, name number 9 on the risers. Zubats continues to climb the board. He had already climbed 6.8 slots this year. He climbed another 0.8 this week. He's highlighted not because of a big jump, but because of a trend line where he's going every week. His ADP is 1 slot earlier, basically, right now, which again suggests that he's going in the 90s and has been for some time. If this starts to slow down, I'll feel a lot better because he's someone I like this season, but I liked him because we were getting him outside the top 100. And I thought, all right, well, this dude does a little bit more with Harden, maybe plays an extra 2 minutes. Well, he has a way to push himself into that 75 to 90 range. But suddenly now you kind of have to draft him in that range. So we're running out of wiggle room on Zubats. He's a name that I'm going to put right on the pivot point, or if he goes another 1 or 2 slots earlier, forget the ADP exact, like, because the ADP is still at 100, and I like that number. But again, this suggests he's actually going more like 95 to 100 range. If that starts to pivot or take that chunk of numbers and shift it earlier by another 3 or 4, I might start to pass on him. I think we're running out of runway. Walker Kessler made a pretty good leap this week. He's up to now 102.1 after he had not moved for a week. So kind of an interesting little note there. He jumped 4 the first week, then he jumped 2, then he jumped 2 again, and then there was no change. And thought, okay, this is all right. This is where Walker Kessler's going to go, right around 104. And then boom, flew up to 102. That was like a John Madden moment for me right there. Which actually most likely suggests that suddenly there's a push to get him at 100 or earlier. And I don't think I'm ready to take that swing, at least not until we know who's starting. And we'll get that news maybe at training camp in a couple of weeks. And if Kessler's the starting center, this would make a lot more sense. But right now, I'm not going to take that plunge. Derek Lively, the second. He's up to number 110 now. Pretty good size jump, actually. 2.1. One of the bigger jumps on the board, actually, at this sort of middle-late ADP tracking juncture. He's another guy who's been, the trend line is also that same direction. Started at 112.7. He's at he started at 125.8. He's at 110 now. So going earlier than that, Lively going between 100 and 110. It's fine. Some of these bad free throw shooting centers their values getting wiped out a little bit. Luckily, you still have not that awful shooting Daniel Gafford, who can post a ton of numbers in not a whole lot of time. You still have Trace Jackson Davis, who hasn't been moving. His ADPs hasn't been moving. Mitchell Robinson's still been going the wrong direction because the Knicks keep signing contracts that everybody's like they're going to package him for a center. Well, maybe, but they haven't yet. So Lively is starting to get priced out for me. I might be out on this one. And then Colin Sexton is the last name on the risers board. He's up to 119 now. And again, one of the biggest jumpers over the span of this entire draft season. Opened at 130.6, up by about 12 since then. And again, this suggests he's going more in the early 1 teens as opposed to closer to 120. I'm still good with him as a 10th round pick. I don't know if I'm going 9th round on Sexton because he also has some pretty good sized holes in his fantasy game that, again, there's an ability to overlook them at times, but especially if you're playing Roto, like he had the starting job the second half of last year and he was 103, 21 points and 6 assists. You feel like it should be better than that. His percentages weren't bad. So you're looking around at like what didn't work for this dude. Turnovers were high. Steals and blocks were not great. Rebounds were terribly low. He doesn't hit that many 3-pointers. So it's hard for Sexton to get really early. It's hard for him to fall as far when he has the starting job because the percentages aren't bad. And he's this weird, like kind of high floor, low ceiling scorer going late in drafts. So that's what makes him relatively appealing. I'm still good with him there. But we're inching towards being a little goofy. Here are the ADP fallers, those who are going later in drafts. And again, this is another dozen names. Who of these guys is now going late enough where I am now will become interested in them? Kyrie Irving falling again down to 20.6. This is exactly what we were looking for last week. You guys remember this show last week? I was like, hey, ADP down to 19.5. Seems like he's actually getting drafted after 20 based on what we're seeing. He fell faster than ever this last week. A 1.1 size drop is a lot in the early going at this point. So Kyrie is like the not at all the belle of the ball, but luckily he's now going late enough where I'm interested in him. Remember last week I was like, I think we're basically getting there. Well, now we're there because 20.6, the ADP by itself, I think is late enough to take him in almost any format. And the 20.6 suggests he's actually going more like the last pick of the second round, maybe 22, 23, 24 range. I think that's a great dude to pair with Nikola Jokic, who's super durable. You take another high efficiency guy who misses some games, put them together, and you're off in this amazing start in steals. Kyrie's a pretty good shot blocking guard, so you move back into the mix in that one a little bit because Jokic is not a great shot blocking big. Kind of cancels each other out a little bit, and then they elevate. The points are decent. The threes are okay. You're gonna have to deal with that one. Rebounds are good. Assists are good, mostly because of Jokic, but also Kyrie's pretty good at those. Your percentages are amazing. Your turnovers are low despite being good in assists. I love that pairing. And now it looks like you can pull it off. Tyrese Maxey took a tumble once again. Not a huge one, down from 27.2 to 27.8, but it does suggest he's going more towards that 29-30 range. I'm actually kind of okay with him there. I still think he probably finishes a little behind that on the per game rank board, but I don't think he's as much of a bust candidate as it was when everything opened and he was going at 23. Now that he's going near 30, this is pretty accurate. I'm still probably not targeting him, but I don't think he'll kill your team. The problem is like nobody wants to draft a third rounder who's going to be a third rounder. We're all looking for a third rounder who's going to be a second rounder, and I don't think Maxey's that. Do with that what you will, I suppose. Jaren Jackson Jr. down to 31.8. Again, not a massive fall, but compared to what had been going on for him, now we're starting to see that trend line going down. He had hovered right around 29 or 30 for about the first 4 weeks, then fell to 31. Now he's down to 32. JJJ kind of going towards the back of the third round. And this is maybe like if you're looking at JJJ or Tyrese Maxey or something like that, Maxey is the high floor, low ceiling option there. By the way, it looks like news just broke that Mitchell Robinson is not going to be ready to start the year. So the hell with that. Wow. Oh, goodness. Targeting December or January. Wow. Okay, well, that's kind of breaking news. We'll do a short on that, but that does change things. Mitchell Robinson is now a do not draft name. Breaking news. Feel like I got to do something with this. Yeah, I'm going to tweet it out. You guys can just watch me tweet in real time. I know it's great podcasting. There you go. Got to get it out quick, man. Bingo. Mitchell Robinson, do not draft. So JJJ at 31.8. Comparing him to Tyrese Maxey, JJJ is going later by 4-ish, according to the ADP, exactly 4, but I mean, we could say 4-ish in real life. And I think I'd rather take a shot on Jaren Jackson. He has the lower floor. I get it. He could hurt you more. But what if the blocks come back? What if you can get a second rounder? I will note, I don't really want either of those dudes on my team, so it's kind of an odd comparison for me to make, and I don't want that to be the thing you take away. It's like, oh, Dan wants JJJ. I don't really. I think it's dangerous to take guys whose value is tied up so heavily in one category in the first 2 or 3 rounds. But that said, like, what if? So I don't really want either of those guys, but I'm thinking about picking between the two. I might roll the dice. Meanwhile, Jalen Johnson, who we hinted at earlier in the show, little teaser moment on the pod, is now all the way down to 41.2. And he's fallen almost 5.5 ADP puntos since this whole thing opened up. He opened at 36.8. That's really something. I guess it's only, 4.5? He's at 4.5, not 5. I'm blown away that Johnson is going this quickly in the wrong direction. I'm thrilled about it because I would love to draft Jalen Johnson at 41.2. And if the ADP trend line is telling us anything, it means he's actually going later than that in some drafts. So is this real? I don't know. But it seems like you can get him more often these days at the end of the 3rd, early 4th than you could at the beginning of fantasy draft season. So I love it. And now suddenly, like, people are having to debate between Jalen Johnson and Jalen Williams. Hell, maybe you could get one of them at the end of the 3rd and the other at the beginning of the 4th and really ride off into the sunset. So I love it. I think Jalen Johnson is a win now. Jared Allen down to 48.8. This is nice. He is a very safe big man who doesn't ruin your free throw percent. He's not a big shot blocker, but he's not awful at it either. He's actually a pretty good shot blocker who just chooses to do good defensive positioning, fundamental stuff instead of rolling around on skates all game long. But he's trending down now. He had hovered around 46 for a while, fell to 47, 8-ish range. Now he's down to 49, which again suggests you could probably, like, let's say you have a pick towards the end of the 4th round. You have like pick 46 or 47. You might be able to take someone else and get Jared Allen coming back all of a sudden. So if this is true, if this really holds and you can get Jared Allen in the 5th, I'm all for it. I think he's a value now. He was close to a value before, but it feels like he's pretty definitely one now. Mark Williams down to 76.8. This I thought would happen sooner. Mark Williams opened at 71.5. He stayed there. Then he fell to 73, then 74.5, then 75. And it seemed like sort of the dropping was slowing. And then it picked back up again now, down to almost 77, which again, now we're talking mid-7th round. 6th round ends at 72. And I am all in on Mark Williams if he's really falling down past 75 near 80. I think this is slowly, I mean very slowly, glacially, becoming one of my favorite moves on the board. I think Mark Williams going near 80 is a huge steal. He was 60 range last year in not even full starters minutes. And I know everybody's afraid of the back. I'm not that afraid of his back. Maybe I'm an idiot, but dude, I think has top 50 potential. And he's going the other way. Meanwhile, Yusuf Nurkic, who I've been saying I thought should go way later, is now starting to go a little bit later. Not as fast as I would have liked, but he's at 77 now after opening at 73.2. He remains someone that I just don't really want. I don't think he's moving down the board fast enough for me. unless you're punting foul shots. Because Nurk was a negative there, 64% last season. He was top 65 if you were punting free throws. But I'm worried about him. He's got better backups on a deeper team, and he was super healthy last year, which has not really been a Nurkic thing over the last half decade. And maybe he repeats it. Maybe he does exactly what he did last year. And again, if you were punting foul shots, that ends up as kind of a useful year. But if you're not, then there are other better options to take in this same range. Simple as that. D'Lo down to 77.1 continues to go the right way for us. He's been falling as fast as anybody in fantasy. I don't know if it's the trade fears or what, but give me D'Lo at 77. I'll draft D'Lo at frickin' 70 if I have to. I would like not to have to, but he was totally settled in. Regular season D'Lo was a great value last year. He was top 50 the second half of the season. I think he even cracked top 40 the last 2 months because he was just firing away. He was great. I think he picks up where he left off. He's learned to deal with trade rumors throughout his career. I don't think it's going to change much. New coaching staff, maybe that's the fear here, but he's still going to get utilized because they need his scoring. They need his spacing. He's one of the best three-point shooters in the NBA last year on volume. He's going to play. So, hell yeah, I'll take him at 80. I think he was a value already, and I think he's becoming a bigger one. Jordan Poole at 94.5. I don't think I can convince you guys to take this plunge because you all got burned on him last year. Against my damn advice, told you, don't do it in the 4th round. You don't draft 4th rounders with a floor that low. It's too scary. It's way too frightening. I'm a very timid man. Who's a 4th rounder with a super low floor this year? I'm not even sure if there is one. Injury low floor would be like a Jamal Murray, although he's now actually going in the 5th round. Franz Wagner, 4th rounder with a low floor, maybe. Jalen Brown, but that was all free throws. There kind of isn't that same guy. Cade Cunningham, I would argue, is kind of and Paolo are your 3rd rounders with lower floors. It scares the hell out of me. I don't like taking the low floor guys early. But I'll happily take them in the mid-90s. Jordan Poole is falling. He's damn near going at 100 these days. And he's falling fast. Opened at 84, remember. Now he's down to 94.5. Meaning he's probably going more like 97, 98. I'll take Jordan Poole at 100. There's no risk there. If he sucks, you drop him. Who cares? Drop your 8th, 9th round pick, your team will be fine. He's going to be probably a relatively high turnover guy, but if he picks up where he left off at the end of last year, it's just like, you know what? We're bad. I'm going to take control at times. He was top 75 with the bad turnovers, and he was more like top 50 if you didn't care about them. So why not? Take a shot. Jalen Suggs down to 96.8. He's been one of the biggest fallers of healthy players across the entire fantasy landscape. He's fallen by 10.6 altogether now, which is the same, by the way, as Jordan Poole. And I think the only player that's fallen more than those guys is Kristaps Porzingis, because for some reason his first rank was based on him playing, even though we knew he was out for 2.5, 3 months. Well, bye-bye Mitchell Robinson. Same story there. I'll say it again. I said the same thing last week. I don't really know what Jalen Suggs is going to be this year. There's a lot of players where I look at them and I'm like, yeah, I got a pretty damn good idea what this dude is going to be. But Suggs was number 100 last season, and by all accounts, he's going to do a little bit more. So if we just kind of fuzzy math it and say, okay, Jalen, you were number 100 in 27 minutes a game. Let's assume everything stays exactly the same as far as like a linear statistical fantasy stat set kind of thing. And let's just add 2 minutes. What do you become? Probably like 90 range. On largely the shoulders of threes and steals, because percentages are not his strong suit. They're fine, but not horrible. And he doesn't pass or rebound all that much. He's not going to score all that much, especially on a team that is adding more veterans to the mix. But again, let's just give him an extra minute and a half, 2 minutes, and say what probably happens to his fantasy numbers. Well, they probably go up a little bit. Everything probably goes up a little bit. So I'm actually okay with Suggs here. I think he's finally sort of fallen far enough where you're like, look, the floor is What if he plays a tiny bit more and percentages regress or something like that? Or steals go down to 1.1 instead of 1.4. But we've seen the dude play. He's a steals monster. And I don't think Orlando's about to take that away from him. So I think at this point, you can put Suggs in kind of with the likes of Herb Jones and Alex Caruso. I just happen to like those other guys more. But if you're gunning for one of those defensive specialists in your 9th round pick, I think Suggs is totally fine. Speaking of defensive specialists, Herb Jones has fallen to 98.7 after he basically didn't move. Weird thing about Herb Jones's ADP is it actually went up by 1, then it went down by 1, and then it went down by 1 again, and then it did nothing. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, it went down by another 1.3. It's not a big move for someone near 100, but it does suggest that people are like, nah. Like, we thought about him for a month, and then we decided, nah. But I actually kind of feel the opposite. I think Herb is going to be fine. I think he's going to be super boring from a fantasy standpoint. But thinking again to what he was last year, number 64 on really good percentages and defensive stats. He didn't even hit that many threes. It was percentages and defensive stats. 2.2 combined steals and blocks on 50-87 splits. Really boring. Does he help your head-to-head team all that much? Probably not, because he's a low turnovers guy. But Roto, he makes a lot of sense. Like, don't set you back too far in any one thing. And if you're punting points, by the way, he becomes a very interesting asset. So in a lot of formats, I like him around 100 where he's going. In a couple spots, like, typically in head-to-head, guys are hard targeting counting stats, and he's not going to be all that great in those. So I get it if that's not your cup of tea. I probably take him somewhere in there. Kind of wish he goes a little bit later. Just like get the last, there's just a handful of more exciting options left right around where Herb Jones is going. And so I wouldn't be that surprised to see him fall another 5-ish over the next month. And then I think I'm in on it. Right now, I'm like, I'm in on it. Not all the way. Toe in the water. And finally, I had to put him back on there. And it wasn't a big move, but Terry Rozier just continues to fall. 99.3 last week. He actually moved up just the littlest bit last week, and I thought, oh, this is the end of it. And then he fell again. Opened at 92.8, fell to 96, then 98, then 100. Then he moved back up to 99, and now he's back down at 100. So, again, I won't spend too much time on this. I just think that there was this weird little blip where people went, did we go too far? And maybe 100 is the barricade. Like, he hits that 100 ADP, and then people are like, nope. We've let him go too far. I like Rozier around here. I said it last week. I'll say it again. If he's going after pick 100, I think he's a very reasonable shot to take. Would I rather have Rozier or Bogdan Bogdanovic? Those guys are going right near each other and have pretty similar fantasy games. I'd probably rather go Bogdan. But the upside with Rozier that probably doesn't so much exist with Bogdanovic is that the Heat are a very injury-prone team. Jimmy Butler misses a ton of time. Hero misses a ton of time. When those guys are down, Rozier gets to just do more, where with Atlanta, the only guy that really changes Bogdanovic's role is Trae Young. Any additional bonus for him is linked to one man. Other dudes being in and out of the lineup is really not going to change what Bogdanovic does this year. Trae Young, that's it. For Rozier, there's like 3 guys that could go down where it's like, oh, okay, I get to do a little more. So when you're weighing that out, you might say, okay, Bogdanovic, safer floor, because if everybody's healthy for the Heat and Rozier's just like, I don't want to play, and they're like, nah, dude. That's where things could get goofy, but there are more ways for Rozier to take that step forward. So you guys know me. I tend to go the safer route, so I think I prefer Bogdan, but I'm kind of okay with either of those guys in that range. Okay, let's do a very, very fast lightning round recap of the 2 pages of names before we wrap things up here. And before I do that, just a reminder to, again, please, if you didn't do it earlier, hit that like and subscribe button. Please do leave a 5-star review. And please do find me on social at Dan Besbris and at Old Man Squad for the network. Here's the lightning round. James Harden, still like him. Alperen Şengün, I like him if I'm punting free throws. Jalen Williams, still like him. Tobias Harris, still like him, but it's getting there. Cam Thomas, too early. Coby White, it's fine. Probably a little too early. Hartenstein, still like him. Anunoby, right near the cresting point for me. Ivica Zubats, still like him, but we're out actually finally now getting close to the cresting point. Walker Kessler, too dangerous for me until we know what Utah's doing. Derek Lively has passed where I'd like to take him, and Colin Sexton is still okay, but getting near that wall as well. On the fallers list, Kyrie now has moved into value territory. Tyrese Maxey has kind of moved into it's fine territory. JJJ is almost, I think I'd say almost at take a shot zone. Jalen Johnson, I love him at this ADP. I don't know what the hell we're doing here. Jared Allen, I like him. Mark Williams, love it at his new ADP. Nurkic, nah. D'Lo, love him there. Poole, willing to take a shot there. Suggs is fine. Herb Jones is fine. And Terry Rozier is fine. And those are your ADP shifts of the week. You guys, I don't know if you guys saw the thumbnail I did for this one where I listed it as ADP's gone wild. They're not that wild. I got to play the game a little bit, guys. I'm really sorry about that. With apologies to those of you who read or look at thumbnails and look at show titles and then immediately make an assessment of what the show's going to be. My apologies to you. I've got to optimize search engine stuff, especially at this time of year, so that new folks can find me and old folks can figure out where I ended up. But I hope that once you listen to the show, you understand that we're going to do the same deep dives we always do, and we just had to give it a sillier, more fun, eye-catching name. Have an amazing middle of your Monday. We will have a show coming up later today. I haven't decided, and this is how it goes a lot for me. I haven't decided what we're going to be talking about later on today. Maybe some more ADP battles. Maybe we'll do a mock. Maybe we'll talk about the burger board guys. I got a laundry list of things to go over. And the industry roto mock is finally now getting close to wrapping up. We are halfway through the 13th and final round. When that does, we'll break it down. I'll talk about my own team, and then we'll have all 11, maybe not Matt Smith. I think he just had his second kid. So possibly 10 of the 11 industry names on the show to break down their team, talk a little bit about the roto versus head-to-head strategic changes and all those really fun things. So lots of good stuff coming up here on Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. Thank you guys for listening, watching, subscribing, liking, commenting, all that stuff. And I'll see you guys in a little bit. Oh, I'm Dan. Probably should have mentioned that again. See you later. Big gulps, huh?